Today, we're diving into the world of visual data in qualitative research. So you're interested in using pictures and audio and video, and you want to know how NVivo can help.
It's like adding new senses to your research process,
Oh, yeah.
going beyond just words to really understand those experiences that you're studying.
Right.
And NVivo is this powerful software for analyzing qualitative data.
Right.
And it's become a real game changer for researchers who are working with all this multimedia.
Yeah, for sure.
But before we kind of get into the nuts and bolts of how to use it, let's talk about why this stuff even matters.
Right. Yeah. Why is this important?
Well, what's so fascinating about multimedia data is that it can actually capture subtle nuances.
Go ahead.
Nuances that traditional, text-based research sometimes misses.
Ah.
It's like the difference between reading a restaurant review and actually going to the restaurant yourself.
Okay.
You get to experience the food, the atmosphere, the service. You get a much richer and more complete understanding.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
But can you give me an example of how this plays out in real research?
Oh, absolutely. There was a study on online learning where researchers were trying to understand students' experiences
Okay.
with a new online platform. So they were collecting survey data, asking students questions, but they felt like something was missing. So they decided to analyze video recordings of the students
Yep.
during those online lectures.
Gotcha.
And that's when they discovered something really interesting.
Okay.
By actually observing the students' facial expressions.
Right.
They noticed these subtle signs of frustration and confusion,
Oh, wow.
especially when the students were navigating the technology.
Right.
And these were emotions that weren't explicitly captured in those survey responses.
Oh, that's interesting. That's a perfect example of how multimedia can reveal those hidden layers of meaning. It makes you wonder what other insights we might be missing when we're only relying on text. Our sources also talk about photo voice. This method where participants use photos to tell their own stories.
Right.
Like, imagine asking pharmacists to document their experiences during COVID through photos.
Yeah.
That could provide such a powerful and personal perspective.
Exactly. Participant-generated visual data, like that, gives a voice to the people we're studying. It allows them to express themselves in ways they might not be able to articulate through words alone.
Right.
Plus, it can lead to a more collaborative research process.
Okay.
Where participants are actually involved in shaping the research narrative.
This is where I get a little puzzled, though. Our expert mentions that going visual isn't always the right answer. Why would we ever not want to use visuals?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's important to remember that multimedia isn't a magic bullet.
Okay.
It's a powerful tool, but it needs to be used strategically and thoughtfully.
Mm-hmm.
There are definitely situations where sticking with text might be the more appropriate choice.
Okay.
Like, for example, if your research question is really focused on analyzing large volumes of text data, like policy documents or historical archives, diving into multimedia might not be the most efficient use of your resources.
Okay.
You really have to think about what's going to be the most helpful for your research.
Right. It's about choosing the right tool for the job. Our sources also mention ethical considerations and practical limitations as factors to weigh. Like, if you're working with sensitive data or have massive amounts of video footage, that would be overwhelming to manage.
Right.
It might make sense to stick with text.
Yeah.
There's this study mentioned about an after-school robotics program where the researchers decided against importing videos directly into NVivo because of cloud storage limits.
Exactly. Sometimes practical constraints come into play.
Right.
It's all about finding that right balance between the potential benefits of multimedia and the feasibility of incorporating it into your research design.
So let's say we've decided that multimedia is the way to go. What kinds of pictures can we actually use in our research?
You'd be surprised by the sheer diversity of visual data out there. We're talking photos, of course.
Right.
But also drawings, maps, diagrams, even things like company logos or screenshots of social media posts.
Wow.
Anything that can be visually represented can potentially be used as data.
It's like a visual playground for qualitative researchers.
It is.
And our sources describe all sorts of creative ways that researchers are using these images. They mention image elicitation, where you show participants pictures to spark discussion.
Right.
There's also participant-generated data, like those homeless children capturing their sources of comfort through photography. And then there are supplemental visuals, like using aerial photos to illustrate geographic changes discussed in interviews.
It's exciting because we're moving beyond simply using images to illustrate or supplement text.
Right.
We're starting to think of them as data in their own right, with their own unique meanings and interpretations.
That's really cool. So with all these pictures floating around, how does NVivo help us manage the chaos?
Well, NVivo offers a few different options for handling pictures. It gives you flexibility depending on your project. You can hyperlink images, embed them in documents, or import them as standalone files.
Okay,
Each approach has its own set of pros and cons.
gotcha.
Hyperlinking might be good for quick reference,
Okay.
while embedding allows you to see the image directly within the context of your other data.
Okay.
And importing as standalone files provides the most flexibility for in-depth analysis.
Okay, that makes sense. But now I'm curious about audio and video. They capture conversations, behaviors, context. It's like stepping right into the research setting. Where do we even begin with all that?
One example that always comes to mind is a study of Norwegian students creating podcasts.
Okay.
The researchers analyzed the audio recordings, and it wasn't just about what the students said, but how they said it.
Right.
The audio revealed their use of exploratory talk,
Correct.
this back-and-forth dialogue where they bounced ideas off each other and collaboratively problem-solved. This type of talk is a key indicator of deep learning, and it wouldn't have been as apparent in a written transcript.
That's so fascinating. It reminds me of a study mentioned in our sources about a pediatric hospital.
Mm.
Researchers used video analysis to observe workflow simulations using electronic medical records.
Okay.
And guess what? They uncovered details that their initial manual methods had completely missed. Talk about the power of a closer look.
It really highlights how NVivo can take our analytical capabilities to a whole new level.
Yeah.
But I think it's time we get down to the practicalities.
Okay.
How does NVivo actually handle all this multimedia data?
That's a great question. From what I've gathered, it seems pretty user-friendly.
Hmm.
You can import, transcribe, and even code multimedia data, just like you would with text. But I'm sure there's some unique considerations we need to be aware of, right?
You're absolutely right. For example, while NVivo can handle various file formats, you might need to double-check the codecs for certain files, especially audio and video.
Hold on. Codecs. Can you break that down for me? It sounds a bit technical.
Think of codecs as the software that allows you to play and work with multimedia files. NVivo can work with most common codecs, but occasionally you might need to convert a file or download a specific codec to ensure compatibility. It's just a small technical detail to keep in mind.
Okay, that makes sense. So once we've got our files sorted, what about storage? Can we embed everything directly into NVivo?
When it comes to larger files like videos, you have the option to either embed them within the project or store them externally and link them. Embedding is convenient for smaller files, but if you're working with a lot of large videos, it might be more practical to link them to avoid exceeding NVivo's internal storage capacity.
Our sources mention a 40 MB threshold for embedding files. Anything larger than that, and you're better off linking it externally.
Exactly. And the beauty of NVivo is that regardless of whether a file is embedded or linked, you can still analyze, code, and make connections within the software. Speaking of analysis, one study that really impressed me involved researchers meticulously transcribing and coding video clips to analyze parent-child interactions. They were able to identify incredibly subtle patterns of communication, like specific facial expressions or gestures that indicated emotional connection or disengagement.
Wow, that's incredible. It really shows the level of detail you can achieve with NVivo. They were doing microanalysis, focusing on tiny but significant moments within the video that could have easily been missed with traditional observation methods. But how do we even begin to code visuals and sounds? It's not like highlighting text, right?
Right, it's a bit different. With pictures, you can code specific regions, like circling a person's facial expression or a particular object in a photo. And with audio and video, you can code segments of the timeline, essentially tagging those moments with a specific code. Think of it like creating timestamps for moments of interest.
That's fascinating. And NVivo gives us different ways to select those media segments, right? We can use time ranges, the media ribbon, or even synchronized transcripts.
Exactly. And once you've coded your multimedia data, you can start to see patterns and connections emerge. NVivo's coding stripes provide a great visual overview of all the codes applied to a picture or media file.
And there's this cool feature called shadow coding stripes for Windows users that helps visualize how the coding of the transcript aligns with the coding of the media timeline. It's like creating a visual map of your analysis. But we've only just scratched the surface. What about some of the more advanced features NVivo offers for working with multimedia?
Well, one of the most powerful features is the ability to run group queries. This allows you to collect all the media files that have been coded to a specific theme or combination of themes. For example, let's say you're working on a project about environmental change and you've coded all your interviews for mentions of real estate development and the natural environment. You could run a group query to identify all the interviews where people talk about both of these topics.
And then what's really cool is that you can turn those search results into a set for further analysis. It's like creating a focused subset of your data that allows you to explore specific themes in more depth.
Precisely. It gives you the power to slice and dice your data in ways that would be incredibly time-consuming with traditional methods.
And once you've done all this amazing analysis, how do you actually share your findings? Can we export multimedia content from NVivo?
That's a great question.
One of the most powerful things about NVivo is that you can run queries to collect media files based on the codes you've applied.
It's like you have a search engine specifically for your multimedia data.
Oh, okay. So you could search for all the photos where people are smiling or all the video clips where a specific topic is discussed.
Exactly. And you can be even more specific.
Okay.
For example, you could search for all the interview segments where participants said they felt both excited and anxious about something.
That's incredible. It's like NVivo lets us ask really specific questions of our data
Right.
and find patterns that we might not have even thought to look for.
Yeah.
I'm starting to see how NVivo can take qualitative analysis to a whole new level. It's not just about organizing and coding data. It's about exploring the connections, testing ideas, and really building a much richer understanding of whatever you're researching.
Right.
But before we go too far, I think we should address some of the concerns people might have about using NVivo for multimedia analysis.
Okay.
Is it difficult to learn? Is it expensive?
Those are good questions. NVivo does have a bit of a learning curve, but there are tons of resources to help you get started. They have tutorials, webinars, and even a certification program. And while it's not free, there are different pricing options for students, academics, and other researchers.
And they even have a free trial, right?
Yes.
So you can try it out and see if it's a good fit before you commit to buying it.
Exactly. It's like taking a car for a test drive.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Our sources mentioned some tips and tricks for working with multimedia data. I thought they were really helpful.
One that's really important is to experiment with different approaches.
Okay.
There's no one right way to use multimedia data. So it's good to try different things and see what works best for your research questions. Don't be afraid to get creative.
Another tip was to always think about ethical considerations.
Right.
With multimedia data, especially when it involves images or recordings of people, it's super important to get informed consent from participants
Absolutely.
and to carefully protect their privacy.
You have to be very thoughtful about how you handle that kind of sensitive information.
Okay, so let's shift gears a bit
Sure.
and talk about some real-world examples of how researchers have successfully used multimedia in their projects.
Okay.
One that stood out to me was a photo voice project about loggers' food choices. They were looking at the challenges loggers face when trying to eat healthy.
Interesting. Can you remind me what photo voice is again?
Sure. It's a method where you ask participants to take photos.
Okay.
Photos that represent their experiences or perspectives on a topic.
Right.
In this case, the researchers asked the loggers to take pictures that answered certain questions.
Okay.
Questions like, what makes it hard to eat healthier in your line of work?
Hmm.
And the photos gave incredible insights into their daily lives, their work environments, and the obstacles they faced in making healthy choices.
It's amazing how powerful visual data can be. It goes beyond just what people say.
Right.
It's one thing for someone to tell you they struggle to eat healthy, but it's totally different to see a photo of their lunchbox full of processed food, because those were the only choices they had at the logging camp.
I love that example. It really shows how photos can reveal so much about people's lives
Yeah,
and the factors that influence their behavior.
absolutely.
Another interesting study used video recordings of children playing during assessments.
Okay.
The researchers wanted to better understand how kids interact with objects related to literacy. By watching their behavior, they gained insights into the kids' literacy skills,
Right.
insights that they might have missed with traditional methods.
It's amazing how multimedia opens up a whole new level of observation and analysis.
Right.
We're not just relying on what people tell us, we're actually seeing their actions and interactions firsthand.
Exactly.
Ah,
And that can be so valuable for understanding complex things.
absolutely.
There's also that study about using video analysis to study electronic medical records in those workflow simulations at the pediatric hospital.
Right, right.
The researchers started with manual methods, but the video analysis showed them things they had completely overlooked.
Yeah. It makes you wonder what other important details we've missed in the past because we didn't have the tools to capture and analyze them.
It's like NVivo gives us this powerful microscope for research.
I like that analogy. It really is like a microscope for social research.
And as we wrap up this part of the discussion, I think it's important to remember that NVivo isn't just for academics or experienced researchers. It's a tool that anyone can use.
Right.
Anyone who's interested in understanding the world around them in a deeper way.
Whether you're a student, a journalist, a marketer, or just a curious person, NVivo can help you make sense of the visual and audio data that's all around us.
It's about giving people the tools to see the world in new ways.
Yeah, and to share their insights in ways that are engaging and impactful.
And ultimately, it's about using those tools to tell stories, to shed light on important issues, and to make a real difference in the world. How do we take all these multimedia insights and actually make them matter?
Yeah, that's the big question, isn't it?
It is.
It's not enough to just have cool pictures and interesting sounds.
Right.
We need to connect those insights to something bigger,
Yeah.
you know? We
Yeah.
need to use them to answer those research questions that we care about.
Okay, so it's about using these new forms of data to actually make a difference.
Exactly. It's about going beyond just describing things and moving towards explaining them.
Yeah,
And
right.
maybe even taking action based on what we find.
Okay, yeah.
Remember those Norwegian students creating podcasts?
Yeah.
The audio analysis wasn't just about identifying their exploratory talk. It helped researchers understand how that type of talk actually leads to deeper learning.
Okay.
It's about connecting those tiny interactions to those bigger educational ideas and practices.
Okay, I see. It's like we're zooming in and out,
Yeah.
moving from the little details to the big picture.
Exactly.
And NVivo gives us the tools to do both.
Right.
We can analyze those tiny moments and then use queries and charts to see how they fit into bigger patterns.
And that's where things get really exciting, when we start asking those why questions.
Okay.
That's when we open up new ways of understanding, new possibilities for making a difference.
Our sources talk about using multimedia alongside more traditional data,
Yeah.
like interviews or focus groups. It's
Right.
like adding another layer to your analysis.
Yeah.
I can see how that would create a much deeper understanding.
Imagine you're doing interviews about people's experiences in a certain neighborhood.
Okay.
And now imagine you also ask them to take pictures of the places that matter to them,
Mm.
or to record a short audio diary about their day.
Wow. It's like you're getting a complete picture of their lives.
Exactly. And then NVivo lets you bring all those different pieces of data together.
Mm.
You can code photos next to interview transcripts, link audio clips to specific themes, and even create visuals that show how different data points connect.
It's like putting together a puzzle. Each piece of multimedia adds a little more to the overall picture.
Exactly.
This has been so eye-opening. It's clear that multimedia can really change the game for qualitative research. It's not just about fancy features.
No.
It's about understanding human experiences in a deeper way.
And sometimes those nonverbal things, those visual details, those little sounds,
Yeah.
they can be the key to unlocking a whole new level of understanding. They can challenge what we think we know, spark new questions, and lead to better research.
Well, as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with a question.
Okay.
What story might your data tell if you could see it and hear it? Think about the questions you're trying to answer, the data you've already collected. What new things might you discover if you added visuals or sounds? We encourage you to explore those possibilities.
Yeah.
See where it takes you.